Hello. So I'm continuing my tradition of not so productive rants on EU4 meta theory. And the topic I want to make is on tier lists. And it's going to be a post-mortem analysis or discussion or rant on a Reddit post I made. And that Reddit post involved me making a joke tier list for modifiers, assuming a world conquest. Okay. I just want to point out that it got a lot of upvotes, and from what I saw in the comments, it was fairly split, right, between people who bought into the tier list I made as a joke, and people who successfully caught on to the amount of bullshit that was in the tier list. Okay, and let me just recap a couple obviously wrong parts about the tier list. First of all, you see CCR at C, probably belongs in SS or whatever. You have unrest, years of separatism. I don't know why it's so low. You have stupid things like goods produce discipline, improved relations, AE, which are nice but probably are not SS. You have stupid things like prestige on S, idea groups, tech costs on S. Okay, so lots of things are extremely wrong, and some things are maybe potentially wrong, but I did include admin efficiency because this was a little parody, right? I had to make it a bit believable, and everyone loves admin efficiency. Okay, so accompanying the post, I made a little R5, which is a little text that has to accompany an image explaining what the image is about in subreddits. And, well, unfortunately, it didn't get too much attention. It sort of got clogged up by other comments. But what I did there was I made a lot of parodies on common wrong or bad argument styles I see when people discuss about meta theory in E4. Let me just highlight a couple. Goods produced. It increases your production and trade income. So it's actually two ideas in one. This is a common paradigm that occurs where people have this intrinsic idea that something that's worth that serves two roles is automatically a really good thing to get. And they don't really account for what's actually in those two roles and how impactful those are. Okay. Another one, people somehow have a hard on for innovativeness. I don't get it. I mean, it's nice, but like, really? That's not S tier material, but whatever. But here's a little gem, prestige. Okay. High prestige gives AE reduction and improve relations. So having high passive prestige lets you conquer more aggressively. So this is a little extension to the two ideas in one paradigm that I introduced. Not only is it two ideas in one, okay, it's also giving you the false idea that you need ticking prestige to grab high prestige. That's not true. You can grab prestige through wars, right? Okay. And one more. This is funny too. Legitimacy. Ignore the RT part. For monarchies, you lose legitimacy when you arm some nations. So having higher ticking legitimacy means you can more aggressively marry for more pew opportunities. Okay, this is very sketchy. RMs also give improved relations. Again, helps with coalition management. Okay, so hope you see the flaw in this argument as well. In general, I copy this in order of ridiculousness. So this is like the most ridiculous, and I hope based on the way I'm presenting it, it's clear why these arguments are very stupid. But let me just try to summarize what's wrong here. Okay, so there's the two-in-one paradigm that I mentioned. People really like things that are that serve multiple roles, and somehow value that intrinsically without looking deep into that. There's a little notion of indirection or substitutability. I'll go on to substitutability. I think this is a very nice term that I can use when discussing EU4 meta theory, but I'll go into that in a later video discussing idea groups. But there's this sense of indirection going here where I'm saying high prestige. That's a bad color, sorry. Where I'm saying high prestige gives you AE reduction and improved relations, and therefore it's really good. without really thinking about how you get prestige in the first place. Okay? And this indirection gets even worse here. Oh, you having higher taking legitimacy means you can royal marriage more. That's not true. You can spend no points if you really care about legitimacy. You have other sources of taking legitimacy modifiers, and so on. Okay, so with all that being said, I want to take a little step back and I guess criticize or explain the role of idea groups in the role of tier lists in meta theory. Here's my proposed way you should think about tier lists. I'll be very blunt. So that's the overall message. Tier lists are not so useful. Why is that? Two main reasons. I'll go over them. One is the idea of a goal, and the other is the idea of failure of isolation. Oops. Okay, so let's just go into the fixed goal. Okay, so what do I mean here? Well, if you recall my title on Reddit, it says World Conquest Ideas or Modifiers. Okay, so there's a goal, right? The goal is world conquest. What are modifiers you want, assuming you want to go for world conquest? Well, presumably in single player, right? Well, it depends, right? We're not clear enough when we say the goal is the world conquest. What particular aspect of world conquest are you going for? Are you going for in-game time speed? Are you going for, let's say, I don't know, some notion of easiness? Right? Are you going for high room for error? It's forgiving. So, and even these guys you can refine, right? Are we banning hordes? Are hordes allowed? Is HRE allowed? Stuff like that. And so you can see how it sort of gets out of hand, and that to really do the whole fixing goal step you have to be so descriptive of your goal that you're going to have, like, I don't know, an entire paragraph describing what your exact goal is and what the exact situation is. Okay? And that automatically, first of all, even if it's successful, people won't read it. But let's say it's successful, people read it, and people agree that that's a good goal to discuss about. Well, then what's the point of tier lists, right? The tier lists are supposed to be general in nature, and they're supposed to give you some high-level guidelines on what's good and what's bad. Okay? And sort of going to that role of generality, the reality is that mechanics in EU4 are so interrelated and complex that you cannot reliably isolate mechanics in EU4. And to do that, I want to illustrate a very common tier list that gets presented, which is the religion tier list. Okay? So first of all, when we compare two religions, A and B, what are we after? Okay, of course, this is not mathematically precise at all. What are things that we think about? Well, we try to think about like what modifiers they give. We might think about their diplomatic situation. You might think about how difficult it is to convert to them, play as them, and so on. And so you get this idea that when we say religion, how much of the game are we including? And people never agree on this. And again, if people agree on this, you're probably so specific that you've lost the role of a tier list. It's no longer general enough. Okay, so let me just illustrate a couple examples. So I'll try my best to draw. I'm not a good artist, and because these are, I guess, religious icons, I hope I don't offend people if I'm like drawing it incorrectly, or like for example, I'm trying to draw an Orthodox cross, but I chose the wrong color. This looked more purple to me for some reason. But I think it's like that. That's orthodox. So orthodox tends to be on like the highest tier, SS or whatever. And people give their reasons for it, like oh, gives manpower, lots of conversion, PUs, dose volt, and great, they're nice arguments, but you really have to wonder. First of all, you have to fix the goal, but assume we all agree on a goal. You have to think about really what's the value of manpower, what's the value of conversion when humanist is very powerful. Um, what's the power of PUs when I can conquer the world in 90 years? You can't even integrate a PU until 50 years have passed, right? And so on. Okay, whatever. But the reality is you have to really refine your situation until you really think about whether these arguments are valid or not. But to even further illustrate my example, this is what I like. Oops. It's comparing the three Muslim denominations. So that's Sunni. This is a very flashy color to represent Shia, and that's Ibadi. Okay, so we'd like to say which of these three are better. So here's a typical ordering. People say, well, Sunni's better than Shia, and Sunni's better than Ibadi. I'm not going to talk about which people think is better or whatever. And here are the reasons people give, right? Usually people appeal to diplomacy. For example, you can ally Ottomans. People might appeal to having lots of true faith provinces because you can conquer Sunni provinces and it'll have true faith modifiers. On the other hand, people might say, oh no, Ibadi is better. Ibadi's the best. Why? They might say stuff like, so this is the opposite of diplomacy. Because everyone's wrong religion, you get Deus Vult on everyone pretty much, or jihad. And what else? Oh yeah, people have like hard-ons for goods produced. I don't know why. I mean, it's a great modifier, but like, okay. And it might say like flexibility, right? Because Ibadis can get more schools than Sunnis. But let's just say our goal is a world conquest. Does it really matter if you can get 5% shock damage or whatever, or 10%? No, right? Everyone pretty much stays on the AE school. So again, it's not so clear whether this flexibility is even meaningful under certain goals. Okay, so what's like the tension here? First of all, there's a tension with diplomacy. On one hand, people are valuing having people of the same religion, so you can ally them. You have a bigger room for AE in terms of being coalitioned or not. On the other hand, people might care about the strict modifiers. Ibadi's goods produced is, yeah, better. Okay, it's better than the CAV ratio that Sunnis give probably in most scenarios. People might care about flexibility. So my point being, lots of things to think about. It's very situation dependent, and none of these arguments seem to be very general in the sense that once you abstract too far, then none of these arguments are meaningful. But then if you go too specific, then they're not general enough to be useful as a tier list. Okay? So hopefully I've explained why I really don't like tier lists, or rather why I think they're extremely useless. And I did it by explaining the idea that a notion of goal has to be agreed upon by everyone discussing tier lists. And that's hard to do. And you have to be precise about it. And the idea that you can't really isolate mechanics well. And the problem is to fix any of these issues, then you lose generality. You lose generality and you start describing what's best for a very specific situation. And I feel like that's not the spirit of tier lists. A tier list has to be general and give good guidelines. My claim is that they don't really give good guidelines, and they're often guided through either obscuring what the goal is, um, or just people not knowing how the game works. Okay, so that's my little rant on tier lists. Hope people agreed, but I did mention it's a rant alert, and I'm sure there is more ranting than productive behavior. But I think the key points to take away from it, at a very high level, is don't take idea groups, not idea groups, don't take tier lists seriously. If you go slightly more detailed, you might be able to capture or understand these two reasons that I gave. And if you heard all this spiel, okay, then maybe you sort of had a reminder, a gentle reminder, that it's very complicated to evaluate seemingly easy things like religion. Okay, I'll mention one more thing at the end. My most hated tier list is the idea group tier list. I hate it. I hate it more than religion tier lists, but that deserves its own video. And this is a little preview. I'll talk about cool things like, in more general, I'll try to be more helpful. I want to talk about the idea of substitutability of different modifiers. I want to talk about um, why, I guess, why the Diplo admin humanist meta for world conquests emerged over other potential options. And I really want to talk about how you should decide what idea groups to get. Okay, but this is a little preview. I'm not sure when I'll do it. Things might change. And this is all part of going to be a series that I might be committing to, I'm not exactly sure, called EU4 Meta Theory, where the idea is that I don't give you any specific strategies. I don't tell you what to do as a specific situation, but I more talk about what I think about when comparing different strategies. How do I come up with new strategies, and so on.